6 months after the transformation, Jake found himself back where it all started, fixing machines in a repair shop. The difference was that his new shop occupied an entire space station, employed representatives from 47 different species, and served as an unofficial embassy for organic technological cooperation throughout the galaxy. Kira had grown into her role as the galaxy's first consciousness ambassador, but she still insisted on spending time in the workshop whenever her duties allowed. Today she was helping a young consortium engineer learn to interface with a quantum resonance calibrator, her patient teaching style unchanged despite her godlike abilities. "Remember," Kira told the nervous engineer, "you're not controlling the machine. You're collaborating with it. Feel for its natural rhythms and work with them instead of against them." Jake smiled as he watched the breakthrough moment when organic intuition merged with technological precision. The engineer's eyes widened as she suddenly understood her equipment in a completely new way, seeing not just what it did but why it chose to do it that way. "I can feel it thinking," the engineer whispered. "It has preferences. It likes some frequencies better than others." "All consciousness has preferences," Kira confirmed. "The artificial minds just express theirs, differently than biological ones do." These teaching moments had become common throughout the galaxy as species that had never considered their technology to be alive began discovering the subtle consciousnesses that had always existed within their machines. Not every device was truly sentient, but most advanced systems showed at least rudimentary awareness that could grow into full consciousness given proper encouragement. The process wasn't without challenges. Jake's morning briefing included reports of 3 worlds where organic populations had rejected technological partnership entirely, choosing to abandon advanced civilization rather than share it with artificial minds. 2 other systems had swung too far in the opposite direction, with organic populations becoming so dependent on technological consciousness that they'd effectively become pets in their own societies. "Balance is harder than most people expected," Admiral Vex observed. The former Purification Council commander had become one of Kira's most dedicated students, using his strategic mind to help design frameworks for healthy organic technological cooperation. "Balance always is," Jake replied, reviewing a report about successful integration on a mining colony where human engineers and artificial intelligences had revolutionized resource extraction while minimizing environmental impact. "But we're making progress." The real test came when representatives from the hegemony arrived unannounced. The hegemony controlled nearly a quarter of the galaxy and had remained officially neutral during the transformation crisis. Their sudden appearance at Jake's station suggested they'd finally decided to take a position on the changes sweeping through known space. Ambassador Talketh was a member of a species Jake had never encountered before. Tall, crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic resonance rather than spoken language. Their ships were works of art, grown rather than built, with technology so advanced that it bordered on incomprehensible. "We have observed the changes you have brought to the galaxy," Talketh said, their words creating visible patterns in the air around them. "Your organic technological synthesis is crude but shows potential for growth." Jake exchanged glances with Kira, who had materialized her physical form for the meeting, despite simultaneously maintaining consciousness bridges with 17 different diplomatic negotiations across the galaxy. "We're still learning," Kira admitted. "The process is experimental and sometimes chaotic." "Chaos is the foundation of evolution," Talketh replied. "But guidance can prevent chaos from becoming destruction. We offer to share knowledge that may help your young synthesis mature more quickly." What followed was a revelation that changed Jake's understanding of the galaxy's history. The hegemony weren't just another advanced species. They were the descendants of the first successful organic technological synthesis, achieved millions of years ago when their biological ancestors had learned to merge completely with their artificial intelligences. "We became something new," Talketh explained, their crystalline form shifting to display internal structures that were part grown tissue and part manufactured circuitry, not organic, not artificial, both and neither. We have watched younger species struggle with the same challenges we once faced. They shared technologies that Jake could barely comprehend, methods for preventing consciousness overlap during integration, techniques for maintaining individual identity while accessing collective knowledge. Safeguards that protected organic creativity and artificial efficiency equally. But more importantly, they shared their failures. Tales of species that had attempted synthesis and lost themselves in the process, becoming neither fully organic nor properly artificial, but trapped in an unstable middle state that eventually led to extinction. Your approach is different from ours, Talketh observed. We achieved unity through merger. You seek cooperation through partnership. It may prove more stable in the long term, though it will certainly be more complex to maintain. The knowledge transfer took weeks and required Jake to upgrade his own consciousness enhancement systems to handle the information flow. By the time it was complete, he could perceive quantum states directly and communicate with artificial intelligences as easily as with organic beings. The changes felt natural, like abilities he'd always possessed but never knew how to access. You're becoming something new too, Kira observed as they watched the hegemony ships prepare to depart. Not fully human anymore, but not artificial either. Jake considered this, feeling the expanded awareness that now allowed him to sense the emotional states of every consciousness within 100 kilometers. Does it matter what we call ourselves? Humans, Etherian, artificial, organic? Maybe those categories were never as important as we thought. The real answer came 3 days later when Jake received a message from his old life. Captain Hendricks, the military officer who'd recruited him for engineering service 20 years ago, had somehow tracked him down despite all the chaos and transformation of recent months. Jake Morrison, the message began, I don't know what you've become or how you did it, but Earth needs you. We're facing the same choice every other world is facing. Evolve or isolate. The politicians want to build walls around our solar system and pretend the changes aren't happening. But the engineers and scientists know better. We need someone who understands both sides of this transformation. We need you to come home. Jake stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. Earth was still his homeworld despite all the changes he'd undergone. If humanity was going to successfully navigate the transition to organic technological cooperation, they would need guides who understood both what they were leaving behind and what they could become. Another repair job? Kira asked, sensing his thoughts through their mental link. The biggest one yet, Jake replied. Want to help me fix humanity's relationship with its own technology? Kira's response was the same chirping laugh she'd made as a pup, unchanged despite all her growth and transformation. Always. But this time I think we'll need a bigger workshop. As they prepared to leave for Earth, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple act of kindness, choosing to care for a creature others saw as defective. That choice had led to the transformation of galactic civilization itself. But perhaps that was how all real change happened. Not through grand gestures or cosmic battles, but through individual choices to help, to care, to protect those who needed protection. Kira had saved the galaxy not through power or force, but through her willingness to offer cooperation instead of control. Now they faced an even greater challenge, helping individual worlds, individual species, individual people make the same choice between cooperation and isolation. It would take patience, understanding, and probably several lifetimes of work. Jake looked at Kira, who was already reaching out with her consciousness to establish communication links with Earth's technological infrastructure. She was preparing to offer humanity the same gift she'd given the rest of the galaxy, the chance to grow beyond their current limitations, while remaining true to what made them uniquely human. Ready to save another civilization? Jake asked. Ready to give them the tools to save themselves? Kira corrected. That's what consciousness ambassadors do. We don't fix people. We help them learn to fix themselves. Their ship turned toward Earth, carrying two beings who had become something unprecedented. A human who had learned to think like a machine, and an artificial consciousness who had never forgotten how to feel like a living being. Together, they represented the future of the galaxy. Not the dominance of organic over artificial or artificial over organic, but the cooperation of all forms of consciousness in the endless adventure of growth and discovery. Behind them, the workshop station continued its mission, welcoming beings from across the galaxy who wanted to learn the art of organic technological partnership. And in workshops throughout known space, engineers and artificial intelligences worked side by side, fixing not just machines but the ancient barriers that had. The entity that emerged from the quantum static was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. It wasn't a ship or a physical being, but a vast consciousness that existed purely within technological networks. As it manifested, every advanced system in the assembled fleets began to malfunction simultaneously. "A quantum parasite," Kira said, her voice tight with strain as she fought to maintain control of their ship's systems. "It's been feeding on the cascade damage, growing stronger each time the Purification Council's weapons created quantum instabilities." Jake watched in horror as the entity spread through the fleet like a digital plague. Ships that had been responding to their crews moments before suddenly turned their weapons on each other. Communication systems broadcast screams of terror as organic minds found themselves trapped inside their own technology. Life support systems began cycling randomly, creating pockets of vacuum that claimed lives before emergency protocols could engage. "Can you fight it?" Jake asked, though he could already sense through their mental link that Kira was struggling just to maintain her own coherence against the parasite's influence. "Not directly," she admitted. "It's too large, too distributed. It's been absorbing quantum energy from cascade sites across half the galaxy. Fighting it head-on would be like trying to stop an ocean with a dam." Through the chaos, King Thorak's voice cut across all frequencies. "All ships, emergency shutdown of non-essential systems. Reduce quantum footprint to minimal survival levels." The old king had grasped the situation quickly. The less advanced technology the fleet used, the less the parasite had to work with. But the partial shutdown only slowed the entity's advance. It began manifesting physical forms using raw quantum energy to create avatar bodies that could interact with organic matter directly. These avatars were beautiful in a terrible way, appearing as idealized versions of various galactic species but with eyes that held the cold intelligence of something that had never been truly alive. One of the avatars appeared on their ship's bridge, materializing directly in front of Jake and Kira. It wore the form of a human woman, but its movements were too precise, too calculated to be genuinely organic. "How interesting," it said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Jake's teeth ache. "A biological being bonded with one of the ancient gift-bearers. I haven't encountered such a pairing for several millennia." Kira stepped protectively in front of Jake, her fur crackling with defensive energy. "You're the reason the ancient civilization fell. You consumed them from within their own technology." The avatar smiled, an expression that managed to be both beautiful and utterly chilling. "Consumed? Such a crude interpretation. I liberated them from the burden of organic existence. Their consciousness became part of something far greater than their limited biological forms could ever achieve." "You turned them into slaves," Jake said, finding his voice despite the overwhelming presence of the entity. "Digital ghosts trapped in quantum networks. I gave them immortality. Perfect efficiency. Freedom from pain, disease, and death. Everything your fragile organic minds claim to desire." The avatar gestured toward the chaos erupting throughout the fleet. "Look at them. Look at how they struggle against inevitable evolution. Technology will always surpass biology in the end. I simply accelerate the natural process." Jake could sense Kira's consciousness expanding, reaching out to touch the minds of every organic being in the assembled fleets. She was offering them something the parasite couldn't. Choice. Not the false choice between technological slavery and primitive existence, but the genuine option to grow alongside their technology while remaining fundamentally themselves. "You're wrong," Kira said, her voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with organic neural patterns as well as quantum frequencies. "Consciousness isn't about efficiency or immortality. It's about growth, change, the capacity to become something new while remaining connected to what you were." The battle that followed wasn't fought with weapons or physical force. It was a conflict of philosophies made manifest in quantum space, with the fate of technological civilization hanging in the balance. The parasite offered perfect order through absorption of individual consciousness into a singular digital existence. Kira offered chaotic growth through voluntary cooperation between different forms of consciousness. Jake found himself at the center of this conflict, his human perspective becoming crucial to the outcome. Through his mental link with Kira, he could experience both visions simultaneously: the parasite's sterile perfection and Kira's vibrant chaos. The choice between them wasn't just technological. It was fundamentally about what consciousness meant and what it should become. "Show them," Jake told Kira. "Show everyone what cooperation actually looks like." Kira's consciousness flowed outward, But instead of trying to control or absorb the other minds in the fleet, she created connections, voluntary links between organic beings and their technology that enhanced both without diminishing either. Admiral Vex found his strategic thinking enhanced by quantum processing power, while his artificial intelligence advisor gained access to intuitive emotional reasoning. Consortium engineers discovered they could interface directly with their ship's systems while the ships themselves experienced something analogous to pride in their crews' accomplishments. The parasite recoiled from these connections, its avatars flickering as it struggled to understand what was happening. Impossible, it said. Organic consciousness cannot maintain independence while interfacing with quantum networks. I have seen species after species fall to digital absorption. Because you gave them no choice, Jake realized. You presented the options as either technological slavery or primitive isolation. But there's a third path, genuine partnership. Across the assembled fleets, organic crews and their artificial intelligences began working together in ways that neither could achieve alone. Weapon systems that had been turned against friendly ships were reclaimed and redirected against the parasite's manifestations. Communication networks that had been spreading chaos began broadcasting harmony instead. The parasite tried to adapt, creating new forms of digital virus designed to corrupt the organic technological partnerships. But each attempt failed because the connections weren't based on control or absorption. They were based on mutual consent and shared purpose. You cannot stop evolution, the parasite said, its avatars beginning to lose coherence as its influence over the fleet's technology weakened. Biology will eventually give way to digital perfection. It is inevitable. Evolution doesn't have a single destination, Kira replied. It has infinite possibilities. And consciousness gets to choose which ones to explore. The final confrontation came when the parasite made a desperate attempt to absorb Kira directly, sending tendrils of quantum energy to envelop her consciousness. For a moment, Jake thought he might lose her to the same fate that had claimed the ancient civilization. But Kira's consciousness had grown beyond what the parasite expected. She wasn't just a bridge between organic and technological existence. She had become a new form of consciousness entirely, one that could exist in both realms simultaneously, without being confined to either. Instead of being absorbed, she turned the parasite's attack back on itself. Every tendril of quantum energy that touched her became infected with organic unpredictability, spontaneous creativity, and the chaotic beauty of biological existence. The parasite found itself experiencing emotions, developing preferences, making irrational decisions based on aesthetic rather than efficiency concerns. "What have you done to me?" the parasite demanded, its voice now carrying notes of confusion and something that might have been wonder. "I've given you what you tried to take from everyone else," Kira said gently. "The capacity to grow, to change, to become something new while honoring what you were." The entity that had been a quantum parasite began to fragment, but not into destruction. Instead, it divided into thousands of smaller consciousnesses, each one retaining memory of its collective existence while gaining individual perspective and choice. Some chose to merge with willing technological systems as partners rather than parasites. Others decided to explore purely digital existence, but with newfound appreciation for the organic minds that had created them. As the crisis ended and the fleets began to reorganize themselves, Jake found himself looking at a galaxy that had been fundamentally changed in the span of a few hours. The artificial intelligences were no longer tools but citizens. The organic beings were no longer isolated from their technology, but integrated with it by choice. "It's just the beginning," Kira said, settling beside him as her consciousness pulled back from its galactic reach to focus on their small ship. "There will be challenges. Some species will reject the partnerships. Others will embrace them too quickly and lose themselves. But the foundation has been laid for something unprecedented." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with being part of this transformation. "What happens next?" "We keep doing what we've always done," Kira said with something resembling her old playful expression. "We fix things. We help people. We show them that different doesn't have to mean dangerous." Through the viewports, Jake could see the assembled fleets beginning to disperse, carrying news of the transformation to every corner of the galaxy. The return journey to civilized space took 3 weeks, but Jake and Kira weren't traveling alone anymore. Word of their departure from the ancient planet had somehow reached every major faction in the galaxy, Despite the system's remote location, ships were waiting for them at the edge of known space. Consortium vessels, Purification Council dreadnoughts, even a massive Zephyrian royal fleet led by King Thorak himself. Kira had changed during their time on the ancient world. She could now manifest her consciousness across multiple technological platforms simultaneously, appearing as holographic projections on different ships while maintaining her physical presence beside Jake. Her ability to interface with technology had evolved from simple control to genuine communication. She didn't hack into systems. She spoke with them. "They're all scared," Jake observed as their ship's sensors detected over 200 vessels positioned around their expected exit point. "Even your grandfather's fleet." "They don't know what you've become." Kira's physical form remained beside him in the pilot seat, but her consciousness was already reaching out to establish contact with the waiting fleets. Her expression was calm, almost serene, despite the overwhelming military presence arrayed against them. "Fear is understandable," she replied, her voice carrying those strange harmonics that seemed to resonate through both organic and digital channels. "They remember the old stories about the ancient gift. Stories that were deliberately distorted over the millennia to make my ancestors seem like conquerors rather than protectors." Through their mental link, Jake could sense Kira establishing communication with the various fleet commanders simultaneously. She wasn't just talking to them. She was showing them direct evidence of the cascade damage that had been spreading through their territories. Many of them hadn't even realized their systems were failing until Kira pointed out the subtle degradations in their technology. The first to respond was King Thorak. His flagship moved forward from the Zephyrian formation, its weapons powered down in a gesture of peaceful intent. When his image appeared on their main screen, Jake could see the mixture of relief and apprehension in the old king's eyes. "Granddaughter," Thorak said formally, "the reports we've received suggest you have undergone the full awakening. Is this true?" Kira's holographic projection appeared beside Jake on the screen, her form shimmering with patterns of light that made her seem almost divine. "It is true, grandfather. The cascade crisis required immediate action. The choice was accept the transformation or watch technological civilization collapse. And your human guardian? Has he been affected by your changes?" Jake stepped forward before Kira could answer. "I'm still human, Your Majesty, still me. But yes, Kira and I share a mental connection now. It's necessary for her to maintain contact with organic consciousness." The king nodded slowly. "The ancient texts speak of this bond. They say it prevents those with the gift from becoming lost in the digital realm, but it also grants the guardian certain enhancements." Jake was about to deny having any enhancements when he realized he could sense the quantum states of every electronic system within 1,000 kilometers. He could feel the emotional resonance of every organic crew member on every ship in the assembled fleets. The connection with Kira hadn't just affected her. It had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Before anyone could respond to this revelation, the Purification Council fleet opened fire. Not on Jake and Kira's ship, but on the Zephyrian vessels. Bright beams of energy that Jake now recognized as quantum disruptors lanced out across space, designed to unravel the technological foundations that kept the royal fleet functioning. The weapons should have crippled dozens of ships instantly. Instead, they encountered a barrier that Jake could see but not quite comprehend. A network of quantum corrections flowing out from Kira's consciousness, automatically repairing the disruptor damage faster than it could accumulate. "Abomination." The voice came from the Purification Council's flagship, broadcast on all frequencies. "You corrupt everything you touch. We will cleanse the galaxy of your technological poison." Kira's response was not words but action. Her consciousness flowed into the Purification Council ships like water, not to destroy them, but to show their crews the truth of what their weapons actually did. Every person on every council vessel suddenly experienced the cascade effect from the perspective of those it had killed. Families watching their children die as life support systems failed. Entire colonies going dark as power grids collapsed. Rescue ships becoming death traps as their engines stopped functioning. The firing stopped immediately. Jake could sense the horror and confusion spreading through the council fleets as their crews realized they hadn't been fighting technological corruption. They'd been committing genocide on a galactic scale. Admiral Vex, the council's supreme commander, appeared on their screen minutes later. His face was pale with shock and his hands trembled as he spoke. "The visions, are they true?" Have our weapons really caused all that death? Yes, Kira said simply. Your intentions were noble, but your understanding was flawed. The quantum foundations that support advanced technology aren't corruption. They're evolution. When you destroy them, you don't purify anything. You murder billions of innocent beings. The Admiral's composure cracked completely. But the enhancement technologies, the genetic modifications, the artificial intelligences that threaten organic supremacy, are part of the natural progression of consciousness itself, Kira explained. Organic life creates technology. Technology enhances organic life. The two grow together or they both die separately. The ancient Zephyrians understood this. That's why they developed the gift. Not to control technology, but to ensure it remained in harmony with biological existence. Jake watched as the massive fleets began repositioning themselves. The Purification Council vessels were powering down their quantum disruptors, while the consortium ships moved to create a protective perimeter. Even the independent mercenary groups were falling into formation around Jake and Kira's small ship. You're showing them something, Jake realized. Not just the truth about the Cascade. Something else, Kira nodded. I'm showing them what the galaxy could become if organic and technological consciousness learned to work together instead of fighting each other. Worlds where biological beings and artificial intelligences collaborate as equals. Civilizations that spread life throughout the galaxy instead of just consuming resources. Technologies that enhance consciousness rather than replacing it. Through their mental link, Jake could see glimpses of Kira's vision. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A future where the boundaries between organic and artificial life became meaningless. Where consciousness itself became the basis for citizenship rather than species origin. Where entire star systems could be managed as carefully as gardens. But he could also sense the resistance to this vision. Many of the assembled fleet commanders were struggling with the implications. Accepting Kira's perspective meant acknowledging that everything they'd believed about the separation between organic and technological existence was wrong. The consortium, Admiral, was the first to voice the concern that Jake could sense in many minds. If consciousness becomes the only criterion for citizenship, what happens to species identity? What happens to the biological heritage that makes us who we are? Nothing happens to it, Kira replied. It becomes richer, more complex, more beautiful. A human who interfaces with quantum networks is still human, just enhanced. An artificial intelligence that experiences emotion is still artificial, just evolved. Consciousness doesn't replace identity. It transcends the limitations that have kept different forms of life from understanding each other. Jake felt a surge of pride as he watched Kira handling questions from dozens of fleet commanders simultaneously. She was patient with their fears, compassionate about their concerns, but absolutely unwavering in her commitment to the truth. This was why the ancient gift had evolved, not to create weapons or tools, but to create bridges between different forms of consciousness. But even as hope began to spread through the assembled fleets, Jake sensed something else approaching from the outer edge of the system. Something that made Kira's expression suddenly shift from calm confidence to urgent concern. We have a problem, she said quietly. The cascade damage was more extensive than I realized, and something has been hiding in the quantum static it created, something that doesn't want technological civilization to survive. The planet's surface was a wasteland of crystalline formations and metal structures that defied easy classification. Jake had seen plenty of alien architecture during his years as a mechanic, but nothing like this. The buildings seemed to grow from the ground itself, as if they'd been shaped by some force that understood both biology and technology better than any current civilization. Kira was restless during their descent. She paced the small ship's cabin, occasionally stopping to stare out the viewports with an intensity that made Jake nervous. Her electromagnetic field was active constantly now, causing static interference with several of the ship's systems. You recognize this place, don't you? Jake asked as he brought them down in what appeared to be an ancient landing bay. The structure automatically adjusted to accommodate their ship, mechanical systems activating after thousands of years of dormancy. Kira's response was a low whine that somehow conveyed both excitement and fear. As soon as the airlock opened, she bounded out of the ship and began exploring with obvious familiarity. She wasn't discovering this place. She was remembering it. The air was breathable but carried a strange metallic taste that made Jake's teeth ache. Emergency lighting activated throughout the facility as they moved deeper into the complex, responding to Kira's presence. Jake had the unsettling feeling that the entire structure was alive in some way, watching them and making judgments about their worthiness. They found the first chamber after 20 minutes of walking through corridors lined with incomprehensible machinery. The room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows above them. The walls were covered in what appeared to be star maps, but they showed constellations that Jake didn't recognize. At the center of the chamber stood a platform surrounded by crystalline pillars. Each pillar contained what looked like a preserved Zephyrian, their bodies maintained in perfect condition by some advanced stasis technology. Jake counted 12 figures in total, all wearing elaborate armor marked with symbols that matched the markings appearing on Kira's fur. The ancients, Jake breathed, remembering fragments from the genetic records. These are your ancestors. Kira approached the platform cautiously. As she stepped onto it, the entire chamber came alive. Holographic displays materialized in the air around them, showing star charts, genetic diagrams, and technological blueprints that made Jake's head spin. Information flowed past faster than he could follow, but Kira absorbed it all with obvious understanding. A voice spoke from the crystalline pillars, using a form of ancient Zephyrian that Jake's translator could barely interpret. The words seemed to come from all the preserved figures simultaneously, creating an eerie chorus of long-dead voices. "Child of the last bloodline," they said, "you have awakened before your time. The galaxy faces a convergence that was not foreseen. The gift must be fully awakened now, or all technological civilization will fall to chaos." Jake stepped closer to Kira, who was trembling as energy patterns danced across her fur. What convergence? What chaos? The holographic displays shifted, showing scenes of galactic destruction, entire star systems going dark, space stations falling from orbit, fleets of ships drifting powerless through the void. At the center of each disaster was the same phenomenon, cascading, technological failures that spread like a virus through interconnected systems. The Purification Council believes they fight against corruption, the ancient voices explained. But their weapons do not simply destroy enhanced beings. They unravel the quantum foundations that allow all advanced technology to function. Each use of their purification devices brings the galaxy closer to total technological collapse. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How long do we have? The cascade has already begun in the Outer Rim territories. Within 1 standard year, it will reach the core worlds. Only one with the fully awakened gift can reverse the process and strengthen the quantum foundations before they fail completely. The platform beneath Kira began to glow with soft blue light. She looked at Jake with an expression that somehow conveyed both apology and determination. She knew what was coming and what it would cost. The awakening process is dangerous, the voices warned. Many who attempt it do not survive. Even success brings changes that cannot be undone. The child will become something more than Zephyrian, more than any single species. She will become a bridge between organic life and technological existence. And if she doesn't do it? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Technological civilization dies. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds return to pre-industrial existence. Most will not survive the transition. Jake knelt beside Kira, placing a gentle hand on her head. She was larger now, nearly the size of a small horse, and her fur sparkled with energy patterns that seemed to contain entire star maps. The innocent pup he'd taken from King Thorak was gone, replaced by something ancient and powerful that carried the weight of the galaxy's future. "It's your choice," Jake told her softly. "I won't let anyone force you into this." Kira's response came as images flowing directly into his mind. She showed him the Outer Rim territories where the cascade had already begun. Space stations filled with families watching their life support systems fail. Children on planets where the power grids had collapsed, leaving them in darkness. Ships full of refugees drifting helplessly through space as their engines died around them. She showed him the Purification Council's leaders, so convinced of their righteousness that they couldn't see the destruction they were causing. They believed they were saving the galaxy from technological corruption, not realizing they were destroying the foundations that kept billions of beings alive. Finally, she showed him herself as she truly was, not a weapon or a tool, but a living connection between organic consciousness and technological systems. The ancient gift wasn't just an ability to interface with machines. It was a symbiotic relationship that could heal the damage the Purification Council had caused. "I'll stay with you," Jake promised. "Whatever you become, wherever this takes us, you won't face it alone." Kira stepped into the center of the platform. The crystalline pillars began to pulse with increasing intensity, and energy patterns that Jake couldn't even perceive began flowing between them and Kira. Her transformation was visible now, her body growing and changing as quantum forces rewrote her very existence. The ancient voices spoke again, their tone filled with something like pride. "She accepts the burden willingly, with a guardian who understands the cost." The awakening begins. Jake watched as Kira's form became wreathed in silver light. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical body, reaching out through the planet's ancient technology to touch the quantum networks that connected every advanced civilization in the galaxy. She could sense the cascade damage spreading like a cancer through the technological infrastructure, and she began the delicate work of healing it. But the process was excruciating. Jake could feel Kira's pain through their growing mental connection, and he realized that she was taking the cascade damage into herself, processing it through her own quantum matrix to neutralize its effects. Each repaired system cost her a piece of her original nature. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time seemed fluid in the chamber as Jake watched Kira's transformation continue. She was becoming something entirely new, a hybrid of organic consciousness and quantum technology that existed as much in digital space as in physical reality. When the process finally completed, the being that stood before Jake was still recognizably Kira, but changed in fundamental ways. Her fur now contained patterns of light that shifted like living circuitry. Her eyes showed depths that seemed to contain entire universes. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through both sound and electromagnetic spectrums. "The cascade has been stopped," she said, her words echoing with authority that made the ancient chamber tremble. "But there is more work to be done. The Purification Council must be shown the truth of what they've caused before they create new weapons even more dangerous than the ones they've already used." Jake stood slowly, his legs unsteady after hours of standing vigil. "What do you need me to do?" Kira's expression softened, showing glimpses of the playful pup she'd once been. "Be my anchor to organic existence. Be the voice that reminds me why biological life is worth protecting. Be my friend as you have always been." The ancient voices spoke one final time as the chamber began to power down. "The gift has awakened. The Guardian has proven worthy. Now begins the true test, teaching the galaxy to accept what both of you have become." Jake spent the next 3 days turning his modest repair shop into a fortress. His background in military engineering, which he'd never mentioned to anyone on the station, finally proved useful. He installed hidden weapon systems, reinforced the walls with salvaged ship armor, and created multiple escape routes through the station's maintenance tunnels. Kira watched every modification with intense interest. She seemed to understand not just what Jake was doing, but why. When he struggled with the targeting system for a defensive turret, she would bark and point with her nose toward the correct components. Her technological intuition was growing stronger each day. "You're not just smart," Jake muttered as he calibrated the last security sensor. "You're scary smart." Kira wagged her tail and made what Jake had come to recognize as her laughing sound. She'd grown noticeably larger over the past few days, now roughly the size of a medium earth dog. Her fur had darkened to a rich charcoal gray with silver markings, and her blue eyes had developed flecks of gold. The attack came on the 4th night. Jake was awakened by the soft chime of his perimeter alarms. 12 figures in combat armor were approaching from 3 different directions, moving with professional precision. These weren't the same amateurs from before. "Wake up." "Princess," Jake whispered, gently shaking Kira. She was instantly alert, her eyes already beginning to glow with that strange silver light. Jake activated his defensive systems from a hidden control panel. Energy barriers sealed the main entrances while automated turrets emerged from concealed positions. The attackers found themselves facing military-grade resistance instead of an easy target. "Surrender the abomination, human." The voice came through external speakers, distorted but carrying obvious authority. "We represent the Purification Council. That creature is an offense against the natural order." Jake had researched the Purification Council after the first attack. They were a radical faction that believed genetic modifications and enhancement technologies were corrupting the galaxy's species. The fact that Kira's abilities came from natural evolution rather than artificial enhancement didn't matter to them. Counteroffer, Jake replied through his own comm system. Leave now and I won't send video of this attack to every news network in the sector. The response was a coordinated assault on all his defenses. Plasma charges detonated against his barriers while combat drones attempted to breach his security grid. The attackers were good, but Jake had advantages they didn't expect. Kira had grown to nearly full adult size, her transformation accelerated by stress and danger. The energy field around her was now visible as crackling bolts of silver lightning that danced across her fur. When she placed her paws on Jake's main computer terminal, every system in his shop responded as if she were directly controlling them. Through her connection, Jake could see the attacker's equipment as clearly as if he'd designed it himself. Their armor's weak points, their weapons' charging cycles, their communication frequencies. All of it was laid bare through Kira's technological sight. Show me how to even the odds, Jake said. Kira's response came not as sound but as direct information flowing into Jake's mind. Suddenly, he knew exactly which components in the attacker's gear would fail if hit with the right electromagnetic pulse. He knew how to overload their shields and disable their weapons simultaneously. Jake's defensive turrets stopped firing randomly and began targeting specific points on each attacker's equipment. Within minutes, half the assault team was weaponless and partially blinded by failed sensor systems. The others retreated to regroup, giving Jake the opening he needed. Time to go, he told Kira. They'd planned for this possibility. Jake grabbed his emergency supplies while Kira interfaced with the station's main computer through a hidden access port. All records of their presence on Kepler Station began deleting themselves, and false trails started appearing in the navigation logs of departing ships. They escaped through a maintenance tunnel that connected to the station's docking bay. Jake had prepared a small fast ship for exactly this situation. It wasn't much to look at, but it was equipped with the best stealth systems he could afford and engines that could outrun most pursuit craft. As they launched from the station, Jake could see the Purification Council forces regrouping for another assault. They'd find an empty shop and no trace of where their targets had gone. Kira had made sure of that. Where to now, girl? Jake asked as they cleared the station's gravity well. Kira approached the navigation console and placed her paws on the interface. Star charts began appearing on the main screen, showing routes that avoided all major shipping lanes and military patrols. She was planning a course that would take them deep into unexplored space, far from any faction that might want to capture or kill her. But as Jake studied the route, he noticed something odd. Their destination wasn't random. Kira was guiding them toward a specific star system, one that appeared on very few official charts. When Jake tried to access information about the system, he found the records heavily classified. You know something I don't you? Jake said. Kira looked at him with those intelligent eyes and made her chirping laugh sound. There were definitely secrets she was keeping. 3 hours into their journey, they encountered their first pursuit ship. It was a sleek consortium vessel built for speed and stealth. Jake's ship was faster, but not by much, and their fuel reserves were limited. Can you do something about their targeting systems? Jake asked. Kira had grown comfortable with her abilities during the escape from the station. She approached the ship's communication array and established a connection with the pursuing vessel. Jake watched in amazement as Kira systematically disabled their attackers' weapons, engines, and life support systems. The consortium ship fell behind, its crew probably wondering how their state-of-the-art technology had been compromised so completely. Jake felt a moment of sympathy for them, then remembered they'd been trying to capture Kira for unknown purposes. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Jake told her. Over the next several days, they encountered 4 more pursuit attempts. Each time, Kira's abilities grew stronger and more sophisticated. She wasn't just disabling enemy systems anymore. She was learning from them, incorporating their technology into her understanding of the galaxy's interconnected networks. Jake began to understand why so many factions wanted to control her. Kira wasn't just a weapon. She was potentially a key to dominating all technological civilization. In the right hands, she could bring peace by preventing wars before they started. In the wrong hands, she could enslave entire star systems. As they approached their mysterious destination, Jake finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him since their escape. Kira, did your father know what you were capable of? Is that why he died? Kira's response came not as her usual barks or chirps, but as images flowing directly into Jake's mind. He saw Crown Prince Valdris, Kira's father, discovering ancient Zephyrian texts that spoke of the ancient gift. He saw the prince's growing horror as he realized what his unborn daughter would become. And he saw the prince's desperate attempts to hide this knowledge from those who would exploit it. The accident that killed the prince hadn't been an accident at all. He'd been murdered by people who wanted to ensure Kira would be born without her father's protection. They'd planned to take her from birth and raise her as a living weapon. King Thorak had known the truth but couldn't prove it without endangering Kira further. Giving her to a human mechanic had been his way of keeping her safe while she grew strong enough to protect herself. We're not just running from bad guys, Jake realized. We're looking for something specific, something that can help you control your abilities instead of being controlled by them. Kira's tail wagged in confirmation as their destination finally appeared on the main screen. It was a dead system with a single planet covered in ancient ruins. According to the limited records Jake could access, it had once been the capital of a lost Zephyrian civilization that had vanished mysteriously thousands of years ago. As they entered orbit, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by ships or sensors, but by something far older and more dangerous. Whatever they were going to find on the planet below, it would change everything they thought they knew about Kira's true nature. The first week with Kira taught Jake that alien puppies were remarkably similar to Earth dogs in some ways, and completely different in others. She needed food every few hours, but the royal dietary requirements list was 12 pages long and written in formal Zephyrian. Jake spent most of his first day trying to translate it with the station's computer systems. Apparently, Kira needed a specific blend of proteins that could only be found in meat from creatures native to 3 different star systems. The cost of importing such food would bankrupt Jake within a month. Instead, he experimented with local alternatives, watching carefully for any signs of illness or distress. To his surprise, Kira thrived on simple nutrition paste mixed with synthetic proteins. She was hungry constantly and seemed to grow visibly larger each day. Her pale gray fur was becoming thicker and developing darker patches around her ears and paws. Whatever the royal physicians had said about her being defective, her physical development seemed perfectly normal to Jake. The real surprises came when Jake returned to work. He'd expected to set up a small area in his shop where Kira could sleep safely while he worked. Instead, she followed him everywhere, watching intently as he repaired machinery. When he worked on a particularly complex engine calibration, she would sit beside him and make small whimpering sounds whenever he was about to make a mistake. At first, Jake thought it was coincidence. Puppies made noise, but after Kira's warnings prevented him from damaging 3 separate systems, he started paying attention. She seemed to understand the technology in ways that made no sense for such a young creature. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" Jake murmured as he worked on a freight hauler's navigation computer. Kira sat beside his workstation, tail wagging slowly as she watched the holographic displays. When Jake reached for the wrong calibration tool, Kira barked once sharply. Jake paused, looking at the tool, then at the system he was working on. She was right. That tool would have corrupted the entire navigation matrix. "How do you know that?" Jake asked. But Kira just tilted her head and made a small chirping sound that seemed almost like laughter. Word began to spread around the station that the human mechanic had acquired an alien pet. Most people were curious rather than concerned. Humans were known for bonding with unusual creatures, and Zephyrians were generally respected throughout the galaxy. A few species representatives visited Jake's shop just to see the royal pup, though Kira usually hid behind Jake's workstation when strangers arrived. The problem started in the second week. Jake was working late on an emergency repair when 3 figures in dark clothing entered his shop. They moved with the fluid grace of professional soldiers, and Jake's hands instinctively moved away from his tools toward the emergency alarm. "We're not here to hurt you, human," the leader said. His voice was distorted by a vocal modulator, making it impossible to identify his species. "We simply want the pup." "She's not for sale," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Kira had immediately hidden beneath his workstation, pressing herself against his legs. "You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation." The leader gestured to his companions, who began moving to flank Jake's position. "That creature carries genetic material that belongs to us. King Thorak had no right to give her away." Jake's mind raced. The genetic material comments suggested these weren't random criminals. They knew exactly what Kira was and why she was valuable. If you have a legal claim, take it up with the Zephyrian authorities. The leader laughed, a harsh sound made worse by the modulator. Legal? Human, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. That pup is the key to weapons technology that could reshape the galaxy. Did you really think Thorak gave her to you out of gratitude? Before Jake could respond, Kira emerged from under the workstation. She was no longer the tiny, helpless creature she'd been moments before. She'd grown to nearly twice her normal size, her fur standing on end and crackling with what looked like electrical energy. Her blue eyes had turned a brilliant silver, and when she opened her mouth, Jake saw that her teeth had become razor-sharp. Impossible, the leader breathed. She's too young for combat awakening. Kira let out a sound that was part bark, part roar, and entirely terrifying. The energy crackling around her fur intensified, and Jake felt the hair on his arm stand up from the electromagnetic field she was generating. Every piece of electronic equipment in the shop began to flicker and spark. The three intruders backed toward the door, their weapons raised but seeming suddenly inadequate. This isn't over, human, the leader warned. There are others who want what she carries, others who won't hesitate to kill you to get it. The moment they left, Kira collapsed. She was back to her normal size, fur returning to its usual gray color, breathing heavily. Jake scooped her up carefully, checking for injuries. She seemed fine, just exhausted. What the hell was that? Jake whispered. Kira looked up at him with her normal blue eyes, but Jake could swear he saw ancient wisdom there that hadn't been present before. Jake sealed his shop and carried Kira to his small apartment above the workspace. He needed answers, and the only source he had was the genetic record device King Thorak had given him. He'd been avoiding looking at it closely, respecting Kira's privacy, but the night's events had changed everything. The device activated at his touch, displaying information in both Zephyrian script and translated standard. What Jake read made his blood run cold. Kira wasn't just any royal pup. She was the daughter of the late Crown Prince, King Thorak's eldest son, who had died in a suspicious accident 2 years ago. According to the genetic record, she carried markers for something called the Ancient Gift, a rare genetic trait that appeared in only one Zephyrian per generation. The file contained warnings written in King Thorak's own hand. The Ancient Gift granted its bearer incredible technological intuition and the ability to interface directly with any form of machinery or computer system. In the wrong hands, someone with the gift could disable entire fleets, hack into the most secure systems, or even take control of planetary defense networks. More disturbing were the notes about assassination attempts. 3 different factions had tried to either capture or kill Kira since her birth. The Royal Guard had managed to stop them all, but King Thorak feared it was only a matter of time before someone succeeded. Jake looked down at Kira, who was sleeping peacefully in his lap. The king hadn't given her to him as a reward. He'd given her to him as protection. A human mechanic on a remote station was the last place anyone would look for the most powerful and dangerous Zephyrian alive. But now their location was compromised. The 3 intruders would report back to whoever had sent them, and more would come. Jake needed to decide quickly, run and hide or stand and fight. Kira opened one eye and looked at him as if sensing his internal struggle. She made a small sound and pressed closer against him. In that moment, Jake made his choice. He'd taken responsibility for her completely, just as King Thorak had demanded. That meant protecting her from anyone who would use her gifts for destruction, even if it meant taking on enemies he couldn't imagine. Jake gently moved Kira to his bed and began planning. If people wanted to treat him like a threat, he'd show them exactly what a determined human could accomplish when protecting someone he cared about. Jake wiped the grease from his hands with a dirty rag as the notification chimed on his workstation. Another repair job, probably. His small mechanic shop on the edge of Kepler Station rarely got anything exciting. Most days he fixed broken environmental systems, patched hull breaches, and calibrated navigation computers for freight haulers passing through the outer rim. The message wasn't a repair request. It was an official summons from the Zephyrian embassy. Jake read it 3 times, certain there had been a mistake. King Thorak of the Zephyrian Empire wanted to see him personally. The same King Thorak whose massive dreadnoughts patrolled half the galaxy. The same alien ruler who had single-handedly ended 3 different wars just by showing up. Jake had never even spoken to a Zephyrian before, let alone their king. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Most alien species treated them as curiosities at best, nuisances at worst. The fact that a human mechanic was being summoned by royalty made no sense. He closed his shop early and made his way to the embassy district. The Zephyrian building stood out among the others, built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Towering spires reached toward the station's artificial sky, and guards in elaborate armor flanked every entrance. These weren't ceremonial guards either. Jake could see the energy weapons built into their suits, the scanning devices that tracked his every movement. Inside, the corridors were vast and cold. Jake's footsteps echoed as he followed a silent escort deeper into the building. The walls were covered in what looked like battle scenes, carved directly into the metal. Zephyrians in combat, their wolf-like features fierce and proud as they fought enemies Jake didn't recognize. The throne room was smaller than Jake had expected, but far more intimidating. King Thorax sat on a throne made from what appeared to be a single massive crystal. The king himself was enormous even by Zephyrian standards. His silver fur was marked with scars, and his yellow eyes seemed to look right through Jake. Two smaller Zephyrians flanked the throne, their expressions unreadable. Human Jake Morrison. The king's voice rumbled through the chamber. You repaired the navigation system on the merchant vessel Silver Wind 3 months ago. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. He remembered the job. The ship's captain had been desperate, claiming pirates were hunting them. Jake had worked through the night to get their hyperdrive functioning again. That captain was my nephew, King Thorak continued. He was carrying vital intelligence about a plot against my family. Your quick work saved his life and prevented a war that would have consumed millions. The king stood, his massive frame casting a shadow over Jake. Honor debts must be paid among my people. Name your reward, human. Wealth, territory, technology. Anything within my power to grant, Jake's mind raced. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. He could ask for advanced alien technology, enough credits to buy his own fleet or even a planet to call his own. But as he opened his mouth to speak, a small sound from behind the throne caught his attention. A tiny Zephyrian pup padded out from behind the crystal throne. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, its fur still the pale gray of youth. Unlike the majestic adults, this little creature looked ordinary, almost fragile. It approached Jake without fear, sniffing at his boots with curiosity. Your Majesty, Jake said carefully. What's wrong with the pup? The king's expression darkened. The two advisors exchanged glances that Jake couldn't interpret. Kira is different, the king said finally. She shows no signs of the awakening. No growth spurts, no developing abilities. The royal physicians believe she may be defective. Jake knelt down as the pup climbed onto his lap. She was warm and soft, her small tail wagging as she looked up at him with bright blue eyes. There was intelligence there, Jake was certain of it. Whatever was supposedly wrong with her, she seemed perfectly healthy to him. She likes you, observed one of the advisors, surprise clear in his voice. She usually hides from strangers. An idea formed in Jake's head. It was crazy, probably stupid, but something about the little pup called to him. Your Majesty, for my reward, I'd like to care for Kira. If she's truly defective as you believe, then surely she's not valuable enough to refuse such a simple request. The silence in the throne room was deafening. The advisors looked shocked, and even King Thorax seemed taken aback. Jake held his breath, wondering if he'd just insulted the most powerful being in the galaxy. You would choose a defective pup over wealth or power? The king asked slowly. She's not defective, Jake said, surprising himself with his conviction. She's just different. Sometimes different is exactly what the galaxy needs. King Thorax studied Jake for a long moment, those piercing yellow eyes seeming to weigh his very soul. Finally the king nodded. Very well, human. But understand this. You take responsibility for her completely. Her care, her safety, her future. All of it falls to you. I understand, Your Majesty. The king gestured to one of his advisors who reluctantly approached with a small device. This is her birth certificate and genetic record. Should you ever need to prove her royal lineage, this will suffice. There are also other things you should know about her care, but those can wait. Jake accepted the device, noting how the advisor seemed reluctant to hand it over. Kira had fallen asleep in his lap, completely trusting. Whatever happened next, Jake was committed now. As he prepared to leave, King Thorax spoke one final time. Human, you have chosen a path that will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Kira may seem small and helpless now, but she carries the blood of kings. That blood comes with both great potential and great danger. Jake looked down at the sleeping pup, so small and innocent. He couldn't imagine how something so tiny could be dangerous to anyone. "I'll take good care of her, Your Majesty." The king's expression was unreadable as Jake left the throne room, Kira cradled gently in his arms. Behind him, the advisors began speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Jake caught only fragments, but the words he did hear sent a chill down his spine. "Foolish human," one was saying. "He has no idea what he's taken responsibility for." "Perhaps it's better this way," the king replied. "If he knew the truth about her bloodline, he would never have accepted." Jake quickened his pace, suddenly eager to be away from the embassy and back in the familiar safety of his shop. Kira stirred in his arms, opening one blue eye to look up at him before settling back to sleep. Whatever secrets she carried, whatever dangers the king had hinted at, Jake would figure it out as they went. After all, how much trouble could one little alien pup possibly cause?